Hi, welcome to the first video lecture for English 234, Science Fiction Dystopias. This is the lecture which is going to be used as the basis for your first discussion quiz. And what we're going to do with that quiz is this one, you're going to have as many tries as you want. I want you to get a feel for what kind of questions I tend to ask on those and how they work. They're generally pretty general questions. They're never about anything specific that I've kind of hidden away inside of the discussion. They should be something that's discussed for, for some time during the discussion. So what I want you to do today is read through the 3 documents that are there in the first module for the class. There are 3 documents that are about how to approach science fiction, kind of general trends that we see in science fiction and dystopias. Read through those, watch through this lecture, and then go ahead and take that quiz. And as I said, you get as many tries as you want this first time. Now, what I'm going to be talking to you about today is literary analysis. Not just literary analysis of science fiction, but all literary analysis and how it works in many different types of categories of literature. Now, science fiction very often is not looked at very kindly by critics. It's often seen as kind of a juvenile form of literature. And one of the purposes of this class is to say that science fiction clearly is not just a juvenile form of literature. It has the same features as any other type of literature, and it is worthy of analysis. So, if we're going to analyze science fiction, we need to figure out how we're reading it. We want to figure out what type of theoretical approach to take. And I'm going to point out a few of these to you. You don't have to take the same approach that I do, but since I'm going to be doing quite a bit of talking in this class, I'm not going to run everything in the discussions, but you will hear a lot from me. Understand what my perspective is and how I tend to see things. What I tend to use is what's called the new criticism. And the new criticism is something that came around in the 1930s, and the purpose of the new criticism was to put more focus on the author, not on historical research into the author, not into research into the author's time period, but to look into the author as a craftsperson, as somebody who was creating something that a reader would interact with. The new criticism came from the idea that an author deliberately places all things that are necessary for understanding a text in that text. And so it gives the author a great deal of authority, a great deal of control over what's going on within the story. So if we're working as new critics, we look at things that happen within a story and we say, why did the author do that? What type of reaction was the author looking for? Now, this particular type of criticism ties in with another type of criticism that's called schema theory. And schema theory is the idea that when we read texts, we bring our own experiences in, and any similar types of experiences that we've had as readers are going to be apparent when we read. The author's going to know about these. So if we tend to have a social or cultural view of a particular thing and that thing is put into the text, schema theory says the author will predict that all readers will react in a predictable way to that particular thing. And it seems very, very precise and almost too controlling, but there's a lot of leeway within it. Now, what we do with new criticism is we look for things in the text that stand out because they're repeated, because they are described in a way that catches our attention, and we look at these things and we say, what is it doing there? So the way the new criticism works with science fiction is we pay particular attention to things that cause any kind of clash, or pay attention to things that do seem familiar to things that we know of in our own time. All right, other types of criticism that we may use in this class that are also important are more political forms of criticism. There is Marxist criticism, feminist criticism, gender criticism. These are things where you look at the text and then you ask yourself, what do I know about these particular things from my own perspective? And with gender criticism, sometimes you're going to disagree with the author. Sometimes you can say, I know what you're trying to do here, I understand why you're trying to do it, but I don't agree that that's the right thing to do. Often when you're doing these types of political criticisms, what you're doing is you're saying the author is a product of the author's time. And we're reading some fairly old things. We're going back to 1952 for Kurt Vonnegut's novel and 1975 for Rollerball. We look at these things and we say, what does it tell us about that particular time and how have we changed since then? What were some of the assumptions made about how the world worked back then? So these forms of political political criticism, I think, work quite well in combination with the new criticism. Now, there are many other ways of looking at literature, and everybody's perception of literature, I think, is sort of customized. They bring in the things that they like to use. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is the idea that when you read, you're reading from a particular perspective, and you need to be metacognitive about that perspective. You have to understand where it comes from. You have to acknowledge that it is there, and you have to see it as not a complete blind view of what's going on inside of the story, but as a focused view coming from a particular perspective that gives you a unique reading of the text.